The town clung to the rocky coast like a barnacle to a ship's hull. It was a place of simple beauty, whitewashed houses baked under the relentless sun. The salty air hummed with the cries of gulls and the scent of the sea. This was the home of the people of the Sabbath. They were a devout people, known for their piety and their unwavering faith. Their lives were governed by the rhythms of the sea and the dictates of their faith. They fished the turquoise waters, their nets heavy with the bounty of the deep. But one day out of 7 was different. One day was sacred. The Sabbath arrived each week like a benediction. Work ceased. Worries were set aside. The people gathered in the small, whitewashed synagogue overlooking the sea. They prayed. They gave thanks for their blessings. They honored the day of rest, just as they had been commanded. For generations, this rhythm of life had sustained them. The sea provided, their faith endured, but this delicate balance was about to be tested. The prohibition against work on the Sabbath was absolute. It was woven into the fabric of their existence. No fires were lit, no nets were cast. The very boats themselves lay idle, bobbing gently in the harbor. This was a time for reflection, for prayer, for drawing closer to the divine. It was a time to acknowledge the source of their blessings and to express gratitude for all that they had been given. This strict observance set them apart. It was a testament to their faith. It was a beacon to the world. The Sabbath was more than a day of rest. It was a covenant, a sacred agreement between the people and their Creator. To violate the Sabbath was unthinkable. It was to invite disaster. And disaster, when it arrived, would come from a most unexpected quarter. The very sea that sustained them would become an instrument of divine retribution. A test of their faith was coming, a test that would shake them to their core. The miracle when it occurred was as breathtaking as it was terrifying. As the sun rose on the Sabbath, the sea came alive. Schools of fish, vast and shimmering, filled the normally placid waters. They churned and leaped, a silver torrent visible from the shore. Such abundance had never been seen before, not even in the most bountiful of seasons. The people gathered for morning prayer watched in stunned silence. The sight was both wondrous and frightening. It was as if the sea itself was offering a gift, a temptation too great to resist. Whispers rippled through the gathered crowd, eyes darted from the teeming waters to the Torah scrolls, their words of prohibition suddenly heavy with consequence. The miracle was undeniable, but so too was the law. The people of the Sabbath found themselves caught between obedience and an impossible bounty. The sight of such abundance was a torment. Fishermen, their hands calloused from years of hauling nets, stared longingly at the bounty. How could they ignore such a gift? How could they let this bounty go to waste while their families scraped by? The whispers grew louder, the questions more insistent. The elders, steeped in the law, preached restraint. They reminded the people of the sanctity of the Sabbath. They warned of the consequences of disobedience. But the lure of the miraculous catch proved too strong for some. They argued that such a bounty was a sign, a blessing from the Almighty Himself. To let it go to waste would be an insult, a rejection of divine favor. Surely, they reasoned, God would understand. Surely He would not punish them for accepting such a generous gift. The seeds of doubt had been sown, and they were quick to take root. Under the cover of darkness, a few figures crept from their homes. They carried nets and coils of rope, their faces illuminated by the flickering light of oil lamps. Their movements were furtive, their expressions a mixture of guilt and anticipation. They were the first to succumb to temptation, the first to break the sacred covenant. They set their traps at the edge of the water, their hearts pounding with a mixture of excitement and fear. Word spread quickly. Soon, others followed suit. What had begun as a transgression by a handful of individuals quickly escalated into a collective act of defiance. The harbor, once silent and still on the Sabbath, was now alive with the sounds of clandestine activity. Nets were cast, fish were hauled in. The air, once filled with the scent of salt and sea, now carried the unmistakable aroma of freshly caught fish. The transgression, once unthinkable, was now unfolding openly. The people of the Sabbath had fallen. Section 6. Voices of Reason. Amidst the frenzy, a few righteous souls remained. They watched in horror as their fellow townspeople abandoned their faith for the sake of earthly gain. They pleaded with their neighbors, reminding them of the sanctity of the Sabbath and the gravity of their transgression. They warned of divine retribution, of the consequences of breaking a sacred covenant. But their words fell on deaf ears. The lure of abundance had drowned out the voice of reason. The people, blinded by greed and a sense of false righteousness, refused to listen. They argued that their actions were justified, that they were simply making use of the bounty that God had provided. They had convinced themselves that their disobedience was, in fact, a form of piety. They failed to see the trap that had been laid for them, a trap baited with their own desires. Section 7. The Siren Song of Disobedience. The streets of the once peaceful town were now a chaotic marketplace. The air buzzed with the sounds of bartering and laughter, the stench of fish heavy in the air. Children ran through the streets, their arms laden with freshly caught fish, their faces stained with salt and excitement. The Sabbath, once a day of quiet reflection, had been transformed into a day of revelry. The transgression had become a celebration, a carnival of disobedience. The few who still clung to the tenets of their faith watched in despair. Their warnings were met with scorn and ridicule. They were labeled as fools, as jealous outsiders who resented the bounty that others were enjoying. The social fabric of the town, once woven tight with threads of faith and obedience, was unraveling at an alarming speed. Section 8. The Heavens Unleashed. The punishment, when it came, was swift and terrible. The sky, once a brilliant blue, turned a sickly green. Clouds, dark and ominous, gathered on the horizon, blotting out the sun. A silence descended upon the town, thick and heavy with foreboding. Then it began. The wind howled like a banshee, tearing through the narrow streets. The sea, once so calm and inviting, churned and roiled. Waves, towering and foam-crested, crashed against the rocky shore. And then, the transformation began. Those who had defied the divine decree, who had broken the sacred covenant, felt a searing pain. Their skin, tanned from years under the sun, began to harden and scale. Their eyes, once filled with greed and defiance, bulged and glazed over. Their fingers, which had so eagerly cast the forbidden nets, twisted and curled, becoming as rigid and unyielding as claws. The air was filled with their screams, a chorus of agony and despair. But for the faithful, for those who had kept to the sanctity of the Sabbath, there was only a strange peace, a sense of grim vindication. They had been spared the wrath that had befallen their brethren. They had remained true to their faith, and in doing so, they had been saved. Section 9. A Legacy Etched in Stone. When the storm passed, the town stood eerily silent. The air, which had reeked of fish, now carried the metallic tang of blood. The streets were littered with debris and with the bodies of the transformed. The once thriving community was no more, replaced by a macabre tableau of divine retribution. The people of the Sabbath, or what remained of them, were gone. Their fate stood as a stark warning, a testament to the importance of obedience and the terrible price of transgression. The tale of the Sabbath breakers, as they came to be known, was passed down through generations. It served as a cautionary reminder that even the most blessed existence can be revoked, that even the most abundant gifts can be a curse. The story became a parable, a stark illustration of the consequences of succumbing to temptation, of placing earthly desires above divine decree. And so, the ruined town stood, a silent monument to a covenant broken, a testament to the enduring power of faith and the swift, terrible justice of a wrathful God.